Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, we'll be joined by David Strom at Hot Air at 3:30. Congressman Andy Biggs is here at 4 o'clock. From the Federalist, Margot Cleveland joins us at 4:30. And then from Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. While you were sleeping, the United States Senate rams through a $95 billion foreign aid package without a single dime of U.S. border fixing whatsoever. Not for you. Not for you. The priority, other people's problems, not ours. This is, we see reports of record crossings on both the southern and our northern borders today. Congress not that interested in your problems. Again, you can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yeah, Joe Biden was rolled out just a few minutes ago to give an address calling for the swift passage of this $95 billion arrangement. Again, remember, the whole idea was, to the extent that we'd give money to other countries, we would use that as leverage in order to get some border security here in the United States. It got put together into just a bastardized, twisted piece of legislation that would actually give out amnesty rather than secure our border. That piece of legislation gets killed. The powers that be in Washington quickly advance a huge spending package that doesn't do anything for our border, and it makes its way through the Senate. At this hour, the House is saying no dice. They're not taking it up. Mike Johnson's saying we're not doing it, and good for him. Give that man an attaboy for that, and God willing, he stands strong in the face of this corruption. Boy, they do not care about what's going on in this country. They do not, and they've expressed it 95 billion different ways today. And they will print that money. They will make you poorer. They will see to other people's problems, and then they will tell you, if you're not on board, that you're not patriotic. Wait, what? You're not patriotic? That's right. You're not patriotic if you don't support somebody else's war effort. It's disgusting. It's truly, truly disgusting. So a couple things happening. Biden just gave this address. During it, he made an allusion to something that Donald Trump said on Saturday of this weekend, talking at a rally in South Carolina about how what's happening in our country right now is a disaster, of course. And these NATO countries, he was bragging about his role in getting NATO countries to spend more money on their own defense. You know, for many, many decades, the United States has spent the lion's share of all of the defense spending in the entire NATO alliance. That's true. It's just like the United Nations. All these international organizations, we pay all the money, we suffer all the consequences. That's how these arrangements go. And in NATO, it's been president after president who've asked nicely for NATO countries to pay at least 2% of their GDP, which is what they agreed to do in the first place. If you go back to Ronald Reagan, you'll find statements from him saying NATO countries need to pay up, and every successive president since. But the unusual thing about Donald Trump was that he was willing to basically, metaphorically, grab them by the throat and say, you will pay. You will pay. And Trump has bragged routinely from the campaign trail and from whatever microphone that gets put in front of him that Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, was thrilled with his efforts because Trump did get NATO countries to start ponying up more money for their own defense. And that's a big deal. So once again, on Saturday, Trump was bragging about this detail. Now, understanding all of that context, you would understand that he was looking to strengthen NATO. Whatever you think of NATO and its validity and its value now, and especially in the wake of the Soviet Union, it's irrelevant. The idea here is that Trump himself was calling for NATO to be empowered. And here's what that sounded like on Saturday.
One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay. You got to pay your bills.
All right, so the guy throttles him. He's like, yeah, in fact, not only won't we protect you, I'm going to call Putin up. I'm going to say, invade this guy because he's a deadbeat. Now, what do you think Trump means by that? Come on, be honest with me. Don't be a cartoon character. Be honest. What does Trump really mean by that? He's talking tough. He's laying out the stakes. You better cough up the money you owe. That's what he's saying. That's the moral of that story, as if I need to explain it to you. The media has gone absolutely crazy for this. They think that Donald Trump is endorsing Vladimir Putin invading Western Europe. That's what they think that clip means. Or at least they're portraying it that way. They may know better, which is stupid for any number of reasons. One, Putin can't even take Kiev. We've talked to Tommy Tuberville about this, the Alabama senator. He keeps pointing that out. He's like, they can't even take Kiev. How's he going to take Poland? Like, let's just logistically, how much sense does that make? But beyond that, Trump strengthened NATO. This is not up for dispute. He was president. They spent more money. Now, not enough for spending money. I looked up the numbers yesterday. I was like, how many of these countries are actually meeting their obligations? There are 30 NATO countries. 11 of them are over 2% right now. 11. So, do the math. It's not a lot who are still not paying what they owe for NATO. But, the United States and all in its endless generosity keeps protecting everyone, including countries that aren't NATO countries like Ukraine. Okay? So Biden, in his remarks just moments ago, decided to take the clip that you just heard and do with it exactly what Morning Joe and all these other goofballs are doing in the media and suggest that Donald Trump is encouraging Russia to invade Western Europe. It truly is mind-numbingly stupid, which is, of course, why it's perfect coming out of Biden's mouth.
If an ally didn't spend enough money on defense, he would encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want, end of quote. Can you imagine a former president of the United States saying that? The whole world heard it. The worst thing is he means it. No other president.
Oh, this is so good. So somebody wrote this script for him. He's reading it here. He's like, the worst thing is he really means it. He wants Putin to invade everybody. He's on Putin's side, he says. And people, the morons in each of these newsrooms all nodding along. Oh, yeah, Trump definitely wants Russia to invade Western Europe.
He means it. No other president in our history has ever bowed down to a Russian dictator.
Oh, my God.
Well, let me say this as clearly as I can.
Oh, please try.
I never will. For God's sake, it's dumb, it's shameful, it's dangerous, it's un-American.
His family has taken so much money from Russian sources. The wife of the former mayor of Moscow has paid the Bidens tremendous sums of money. I would never, ever, ever bow down to any foreign adversary. He's taken millions from China, millions from Russia. This guy stinks to high heaven with foreign influence peddling. And here he is being like, I'm as pure as the driven snow. I would never do anything to advantage them. Oh, please. Let me say this as clearly as I'm even capable of saying it. Donald Trump would invite Putin to invade the world.
When America gives us word, it means something.
Oh, please.
When we make a commitment, we keep it. And NATO is a sacred commitment.
Sacred.
Donald Trump looks at this.
It's sacred. It's so sacred that 2/3 of the countries don't keep their commitment. It's so sacred. They don't pay their 2%. But we keep it. That's the sacred responsibility of the United States, to get played for suckers every single year. Trump wasn't for that. Trump was done with being played for a sucker. Trump was like, hey, you're going to pay up. Well, if we don't meet the minimum, then are you going to protect? No, how about this? How about I'm not going to protect you. In fact, I'm going to call Putin and I'm going to get a translator to help me as accurately as possible translate invade that country in Russian.
This as if it's a burden. When he looks at NATO, he doesn't see the alliance that protects America and the world. He sees a protection racket. He doesn't understand that NATO is built on fundamental principles of freedom, security, and national sovereignty. Because for Trump, principles never matter. Everything is transactional.
It's so funny. And well, what's the principle? The principle at stake is you pay 2% if you'd like to be a part of this alliance. And guess who's not doing it? 2/3 of the countries who are involved. So Trump's the man of principle. Biden's the pushover. Biden's just rolling easily. It's not hard to roll that guy. He trips on stage. How do you think these world leaders handle him? They roll him, and they get away with it. And they raid the U.S. Treasury. And Biden prints out more money for the defense of not only NATO countries, but everybody else too. Everybody else too. $95 billion they want to send out the door. So that's what he was arguing for today. Oh, so important we do this. And then he said that it's Trump who's the dangerous one, the one who empowered the very organization that you say is so important. How is Trump dangerous exactly? It's mindless, totally mindless, which again makes it perfect coming out of Joe Biden's mouth. Now, we've got some reporting today about the Biden family and its corruption. And it's important stuff. Tony Bobulinski is back in the picture. Bobulinski just did testimony today in front of Congress about the extent to which the Bidens are corrupt, and Joe Biden himself was very much in play, selling access to the United States' most dangerous adversaries, according to Tony Bobulinski. He's not holding back at all on this. In fact, let me quote for you some from this opening statement from Tony. And we're going to hit this in more detail coming up with Andy Biggs and Margot Cleveland, Tom Fitton, everybody. We got a lot of people to talk to about this today. He starts this way. Again, this is not in any way a piece of audio right now. This was just behind closed doors testimony, but this is his opening statement today. I won't read it in its entirety, but boy, it's got a lot of good stuff in it. He said, "Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you," he says to these members of Congress. "I'm happy that the American people will finally hear the facts and evidence that I've been trying to outline for over 4 years, all backed up and supported by emails, texts, documents, records, pictures, and other evidence. The fact we are going to discuss today are important for America's national security, and I can only hope that everyone in this room and all representatives and officers of the U.S. government take them seriously." He goes on, he says, "My name is Tony Bobulinski. I'm a proud American citizen who has honorably served the United States in several capacities. For over 6 years, I was an officer in the United States Navy's elite Naval Nuclear Power Training Command as a decorated master training specialist instructor." He goes on further to describe his excellent fitness reports and all of his involvement in the military through the years. Then he goes on to talk about how he comes from a long line of Bobulinskis who all served in the military. The military is very much in his background, and it's very much of a part of his presence now. He's got siblings who are both in the military and who work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, respectively. In other words, big legacy of serving the country. Big legacy. He says, "For nearly 4 years, I've tried to tell the American people the truth about serious corruption at the very top of their government. In return, I have been falsely accused of being a purveyor of, quote, Russian disinformation and a political surrogate. My continuous efforts to inform the American people of the facts have been actively suppressed by both the United States government and the so-called mainstream media. I want to be crystal clear. From my direct personal experience and what I have subsequently come to learn, it is clear to me that Joe Biden was the brand being sold by the Biden family. His family's foreign influence peddling operation from China to Ukraine and elsewhere sold out to foreign actors who were seeking to gain influence and access to Joe Biden and the United States government. Joe Biden was more than a participant in and the beneficiary of his family's business. He was an enabler," says Tony Bobulinski. This is a Biden family business partner in sworn congressional testimony today. He says Biden was an enabler despite being buffered by a complex scheme to maintain plausible deniability. Do you remember that phrase? Plausible deniability? It's what he once uttered to Tucker Carlson in an interview in 2020. He said he was told by the Biden family not to mention Joe. Don't mention Joe's name. And in fact, they're going to do everything they can to cover up his involvement.
And I remember looking at Jim Biden and saying, how are you guys getting away with this? Like, aren't you concerned? And he looked at me and he laughed a little bit and said, plausible deniability.
He said that out loud?
Yes, he said it directly to me, one-on-one in a cabana at the Peninsula Hotel after about a hour and a half, 2-hour meeting, with me asking out of concern, how are you guys doing this? Aren't you concerned that you're going to put your brother's, future presidential campaign at risk? The Chinese, the stuff that you guys have been doing already in 2015 and 2016 around the world. And I just can almost picture his face where he sort of chuckles and says, plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability. Tony Bobulinski going into more detail before Congress today. A fiery opening statement, openly declaring that Joe Biden was absolutely what that family was selling, as if you needed any more evidence to support that. To the State of the Union. Please join us. It's going to be a fun time mocking old Joe. Or whoever gives the State of the Union. I guess we'll see. Let's see here. Russ in Alexandria, line 3. Russ, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, listening to the Bobulinski testimony and the things that you've done, I just want the Democrats and the media to just admit it. You know what? You're absolutely right. He is everything you say Biden is and more. Don't be upset with us because our guy was smart enough to lead you down the path for so long. But don't expect me to be a political flat earther and tell you, ask me to believe that he is anything other than a corruptocrat. It is amazing.
Well, this tells you, doesn't it tell you everything, Russ? The fact that they ignored Tony Bobulinski, and when I say they, it's not just the media, but it's also the FBI. The FBI sat down with him for a long interview prior to the 2020 election. After that, they never checked back in. In fact, in his opening testimony today, he says the U.S. government has just ignored him. The Biden administration refuses to talk to him. Those are all the indicators of a very corrupt regime.
Exactly. This is the thing. Look. Don't be upset because our guys are better at being corrupt than your guys. Trump may be a narcissistic boob, but he is what he is, and we can admit it. I want the world to admit what Joe Biden is.
Did you refer to Trump as a narcissistic boob? Was that the phrasing?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, he's our narcissistic boob, so, exactly, the hands off.
But we don't pretend that he is anything other than what he is.
Right. No, it's right. It's right. The right. It's funny because the right. Everyone is honest about what they actually think. Like, oh yeah, I think here's what I don't like about him. I don't like the tweets or whatever it is. Meanwhile, the left, you got to walk in lockstep. You saw Jon Stewart tried to return to the Daily Show last night, and he dared talk about how Joe Biden is too old for the job. The left is freaking out today. You aren't allowed to say that. You're not allowed to talk about that. Like, what? I'm sorry, this is America. Jon Stewart is allowed to be dumb on television. Heck, he's even allowed to criticize his own side. Not anymore, Russ. Thank you. Important points. It's amazing. Hey, coming up, David Strom will be here. We'll talk to him about the "Are you a neurologist?" defense that the left is mounting right now to say that Joe Biden's brain is fine. How could you possibly say there are problems? David Strom, minutes away. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Andy Biggs is here at 4 o'clock. They had a big conversation with Tony Bobulinski today. We'll find out more from that. Margot Cleveland will join us from the Federalist at 4:30. Then from Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton at 5 o'clock. You can talk to us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A North Korean-style defense of Joe Biden emerging this week after the Robert Hur report comes out and says that his memory doesn't work so good. In fact, a jury was unlikely to find him guilty of any crimes because of the sympathetic trauma that exists within his brain. Now, the White House and all of its defenders are rushing around saying that Joe Biden is the smartest, most capable man to walk the earth. And that Robert Hur is not a neurologist, so he doesn't get to tell us that Biden was forgetting simple things like the date he was the vice president or the date of his son's passing. Here to talk about the "Are you a neurologist or a neuroscientist?" defense is David Strom, associate editor at Hot Air, joins us on the phone. Hello, David. Good to talk to you, sir.
You are my favorite radio host, and that is not a boast. That is just absolutely a fact.
Well, not to belabor this point that brings me joy, but why? Why am I your favorite host?
It's actually more for the conversations we've had off the air than on the air. Although,
don't tell people that. Now they're going to think they're missing something.
Oh, my gosh. You are just one of the smartest radio hosts I've ever talked to.
Enough.
I mean, your listeners are lucky.
We're in a big studio, but not big enough to contain the size of my head after that. Thank you, David. Hey, let me drill down here with you. There is an interesting defense popping up that suddenly you need to be a neurologist or a neuroscientist to be able to assess whether or not Joe Biden is with it. This is a similar defense that we've noticed that the left has wielded before when they refuse to admit the obvious about someone's gender. They say something like, well, I'm not a biologist.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it is absolutely hilarious to see this because in both of these cases, people's sex and of course Joe Biden's mental capacities, you don't have to be an expert on anything. And first of all, we've learned over the past 5 years that experts are among the least reliable people on complicated issues,
Yes.
most. But even if that weren't the case, anyone who has had a grandparent who has gradually lost their faculties can see exactly the same phenomenon in Joe Biden. And so it doesn't take an expert, it doesn't take a neuroscientist, it takes, life experience. Now, if someone is moving into dementia, is at the cusp, or if they have some sort of other disease that can mimic dementia, that may take a neuroscientist. But this doesn't. I mean, the guy shakes hands with people who are not there. So, I mean, he's not all there. We know that. Everybody knows that. 86% of the country says that they can see it before their eyes.
Yeah, and these aren't close calls. This is not like, some sort of subtle scientific assessment. When Robert Herr says that he can't remember the years that he was vice president of the United States, that's a massive red flag that doesn't require a medical school education.
Yeah, I mean, the real story here is not Joe Biden because it's not news. Everybody knows it. The real story is that the mainstream media has gone into overdrive to hide a very basic, very obvious fact. I mean, they have this infinite, faith in what I call the narrative. They believe that reality is what you say it is. And if you just say it often enough and loud enough, that somehow it makes it true, or at the very least, other people will believe it.
Well, the only person who can do that is not even a person, that's God. Only God can use words to conjure something into existence. The rest of us live within his existence, right? So, but the left has this kind of this view that actually they're God. And if they just say it, it becomes true.
Yeah, this really, I mean, not to get too deep into philosophy or anything, although that's what I studied way back when. This really goes back to the argument that came out in the late 19th century that God is dead, and therefore we can revalue everything. There is no standard by which things can be judged. And so we can make them up. And really the history of the last 130, 140 years has been a massive argument over precisely that. And the left has gone 100% all in on the idea that reality is what we say it is, which is how you wind up with absurdities like there being, 87 or 142 or God knows how many genders, because there is nothing to which reality is rooted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, the most interesting thing here is that you've got, on the one hand, an elite that's members of this super highly educated class who actually do nothing. There's no sort of physical connection to reality.
No.
Talking is what they do.
No.
And then you've got ordinary people for whom going against reality slaps them in the face. Actual direct experience matters. And, for those of us who have actually had to sit down and take care of someone with dementia, we can look and say, yeah, that person is clearly, they're on the other side of that line.
What role?
What
role do you think Jill Biden plays in all of this? Dr. Jill.
Oh my gosh. In fact, a perfect example is, the discussion about whether, who put Joe Biden out after the Herr report and he made such a fool of himself. I think that was Joe Biden. I think that Jill is desperate to hold on. Both of them have inferiority complexes, right? She's Dr. Jill Biden. And, Joe Biden is constantly telling you that his IQ is higher than anyone else's. It's because neither of them really believes that. They have to prove it. And so she's desperate to remain first lady because it bolsters her ego. She's essentially riding Joe Biden's coattails in the same way that Hunter Biden has been living off his father's name all this time. And it's because, to a certain extent, their lives are empty without all the pomp and circumstance.
Yeah, we're living with the consequences of that insecurity and that desire.
Yeah, and at this point, and I am not inclined to feel sorry for Joe Biden because he's been, a bad force in American politics for, decades. But at this point, we really are looking at elder abuse. He's constantly being humiliated in public. It makes you feel uncomfortable to see the president of the United States wandering around on stage, wondering where he's supposed to stand.
Yes.
Falling asleep, in the midst of a press conference with a world leader. It's embarrassing for us. It's embarrassing for him. We have conversations now about, whether he lost control of his bowels with the Pope. And I don't know that it's true or not, but let's face it. People look at that and say, well, that's plausible,
Right. It's plausible enough for you to be like, oh, that's unfortunate. I hope that didn't happen, but you can't be certain. Now, on his health and having a doctor actually assess him, the White House did announce yesterday that they will be rigging the next physical. They said there will be no cognitive test administered, obviously because they would like to avoid the outcome of that cognitive test going public. Here's how Herridge described it.
We do this this third year.
Does the White House think that the idea of the president taking a cognition test, a cognitive test, as a part of this physical is a legitimate idea, particularly just on the heels of the special counsel report, more polling, as my colleague Selena just mentioned, showing that many American people have concerns about that?
Look, I got this question last week as well, and I'm just going to say what Dr. O'Connor, it's kind of what he said to me about a year ago when the report came out last year, obviously on his physical, which is the president proves every day how he operates.
He proves every day how he operates.
Yeah.
So that should settle that matter. No cognitive test necessary, David Strom.
That was one of the great jokes. Although for me, the number one proof that Joe Biden has dementia is that Alejandro Mayorkas said he didn't. And the one thing we know is if Mayorkas is saying anything in public, it is a lie.
Uh-huh. That's right. Our border is secure and Joe Biden is of sound mind. Yes, I'm with you. Yeah, Mayorkas. That's right. He's like the last guy you'd want to send out to defend you. No, thanks, Alejandro. Just sit this one out. That's true. So Biden's mental state is gone. Now, here's the thing. It's funny to watch the White House's response to all of this is to say that it's the Justice Department who is undertaking a political attack against Joe Biden. In fact, yesterday, Herridge referred to as Robert Hur as a Republican, obviously. Take a listen to this.
When can we talk to the president's doctor, and how come they haven't been asked to come out here and talk with us, given the Hur report that challenges the president's mental fitness?
So look, just to speak to the Hur report really, really quickly. Special Counsel Hur is, as far as I remember, is obviously a Republican.
He's a Republican. So you can discount everything he says, obviously. The person who was empowered by Joe Biden's attorney general.
Yeah, well, in fact, there's, subterranean in Washington, there's an attack going on against Merrick Garland as someone who is undermining Joe Biden, which strikes me as quite the joke. Merrick Garland has not been quite as loyal as Bobby Kennedy was to his brother, but he comes close, And the only reason why the special prosecutor was actually appointed is that they were going after Trump for exactly the same issue. And so he was in an absolute bind. And, at the end of the day, Joe Biden got off.
Yes. This was a political rescue operation for Joe Biden, orchestrated by Merrick Garland, and Robert Hur was the vehicle through which he did it. And in fact, look at what the report says. They're not charging Joe. Problem solved.
Oh, yeah. In fact, that was their very first spin on this, was just he was exonerated. And the problem with that is that the, very first sentence of the report is essentially Joe Biden committed a crime.
Yes.
And there's more than enough evidence to show that he committed a crime. And actually, he committed a crime far greater than the one that Trump is accused of, carrying on for years with top secret documents that have sources and methods. And so there needed to be an explanation for why.
Yes. And he wasn't president of the United States. There's a huge category difference here in terms of the handling of these kinds of documents. He was vice president, and prior to that, a senator, stole classified documents throughout that time, and now wants credit for turning them in nearly 4 decades or something later. It's ridiculous. But that's the Joe Biden way. And I just want to ask you about this Merrick Garland thing, because I have noticed, and I did expect, I was saying it last week, get ready, here come the attacks on Merrick Garland. Here they are. And among the reasons Joe Biden apparently is angry at Merrick Garland is, one, for allowing this detail about his brain to make its way through Robert Hur's report to the public. 2, for not doing enough to protect Hunter Biden, although, of course, the Justice Department has moved heaven and earth to give him broad immunity. It was only a judge who caught all of this, who stopped that from happening. And 3, he's upset that Merrick Garland hasn't successfully gotten a Trump conviction prior to the election yet. He was hoping that the timetable would move more quickly so that they could rig the election. I don't know how it gets much more transparent that this is as corrupt as it gets.
Yeah, well, that really, and there has not been enough coverage of that. I mean, it is out there that Joe Biden is upset at Merrick Garland for not putting Donald Trump in jail yet. We really have entered banana republic territory and have been there for, I think, sometime back into the Obama administration, when they started spying on reporters. And of course, you had the IRS going after, denying conservatives, nonprofit status, all of that. And it has just gotten worse and worse, to the point now where, there are people in the mainstream media who are basically saying, well, we're in a national emergency, so we shouldn't have to obey the laws. I mean, Trump is just such an existential threat that we should toss out all, the Constitution. And that's where we are.
Yeah, which is why a vote for Trump is a vote to save democracy, not to end it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
David Strom over at Hot Air. Always great to talk to you, sir. I do always enjoy our conversations. Thank you very much, sir. Over the course of this last hour, I've been getting a lot of attention on Twitter for sharing the news that just broke right before our show came on, that CBS News' Catherine Herridge, you may remember her from the Fox News Channel. She's been at CBS for a time, an always fair reporter, deeply sourced. She's just been laid off by CBS. New York Post reporting there's been a bloodbath today at CBS News. Several CBS News reporters have lost their jobs. And Catherine Herridge was among 800 employees at CBS parent company Paramount Global who lost their jobs today. Sources said that Catherine Herridge had clashed with CBS News president Ingrid Cyprian Matthews. And by the way, the New York Post has previously described that person, the CBS lady in charge, as a woke boss who's been accused of all sorts of bias accusations, specifically for targeting white journalists and giving other people preferences based on their race over white candidates. And so here you have her apparently laying off Catherine Herridge, or somebody at that company deciding to let go of Catherine Herridge. What has Catherine Herridge been reporting on? The Biden family. Lately, she's been doing extensive reporting on what these oversight committees have been digging up, what they're revealing about the Biden family. And it comes at a very inopportune time for Biden to have her digging in. But for Biden, a very opportune moment as CBS lets go of a tenacious reporter, lays her off, according to the New York Post today. If we get any updates on that story, we'll share them with you. But kind of fascinating as she digs on the Bidens. CBS lets her go. You'd think a company that was trying to cut back would keep the valuable members of their team. That would be Catherine Herridge. Joining us in the next hour, Andy Biggs has actual details from inside of Congress today. Tony Bobulinski testifying behind closed doors this morning. Margot Cleveland from The Federalist, and a lot more ahead on The Vince Colonnese Show.